So happy Epiphany. January 6th was the feast day of the Epiphany, but it falls in the middle of the week, so we celebrate it the Sunday following with evensong tonight at 5 p.m., just so you all know, which was going to be beautiful. And January 6th also begins the long season of Epiphany. I say long because this year it's about as long as it can be with Ash Wednesday falling on, I think, in the first week of March. So we're going to have a good couple months of this Epiphany season. The season of Epiphany is where we hear story after story from the Bible about how God has been revealed to God's people throughout history, and in particular in the person of Jesus. In our readings from Isaiah, the prophet speaks for God and reminds the people that they belong to God, and that God will bring justice and healing. A new day is dawning on the people of Israel. In our psalm today, we hear the action of God described, a very powerful God whose voice is like thunder, who strips the trees bare and breaks their branches. This is the same voice that also offers blessing. In the reading from Acts, Peter is preaching and teaching about God to the people, telling them that God shows no partiality. There is one God for everyone. And this one God has anointed Jesus of Nazareth as the Christ to show us the way to God. And then finally, in the gospel, we have the baptism of Jesus. Now, each of the four gospels has a slightly different take on Jesus' baptism. But what they hold in common is that John did the baptizing, and that the Spirit of God descended upon the scene like a dove, accompanied by a voice from heaven saying, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Each of these revelations of God's power, presence, love, and blessing is an epiphany. Epiphany comes from the Greek epi, meaning upon, and phanon, meaning to appear. In English, we define it as appearing or manifesting. It's also related to another Greek word, theophany, which means the appearance from phanon, and God, theo, so the appearance of God or vision of God. And while we call this season the season of Epiphany, it's really a season of theophanies, of God appearances. God appears to us in this season in ways that help us to know who God is by how God is in the world, by God's actions. We will see that God is just and merciful and loving, that God blesses and brings peace, and that God is also powerful and strong, bigger than us, beyond our knowing, yet revealed to us in the stories that we'll hear over the next couple of months. In the popular culture, we speak about having an epiphany when suddenly everything becomes clear. Have you ever noticed that when you have an epiphany like this, it is a momentary thing? Whatever has become known to us in that moment of epiphany may be very transformative. We may gain a new insight into the world, our own lives and relationships. And this insight, this aha moment, might lend itself to a change in direction or behavior. But the moment itself, that feeling of aha, of things coming together and making sense, that lasts only a moment, and then it's gone. There's something sort of bittersweet about this. Who does not love that moment of everything coming together and making sense? It's a great feeling. And then when it's gone, there is a task ahead of us, a change in direction, new ideas of how to be in the world, in a way more fully true to who we have been created to be. This was certainly the case for Jesus. The moment of his baptism, things came together for him and for all those who were gathered around. God spoke to the crowd, telling them that this Jesus is God's Son, the beloved one. What a beautiful epiphany to have. For Jesus, this declaration of God's presence in him began his life's work in earnest. It is from the point of his baptism that he began this relentless work of bringing God to the people in real flesh and blood. Jesus was loving, just, merciful, prophetic. He healed and was an advocate for the poor and marginalized, the scandalized and the despised. He was relentless in calling the people of Israel to account for not living up to their covenant with God, and he did so with humility, clarity, and power. Of all the epiphanies of our lives, our primary experience of epiphany is in our baptism. This is when everything came together for us, when we were given the sacramental experience of our identity as a beloved child of God. From this moment, our work begins as Christians, the body of Christ in our world today. The words of our baptismal covenant make clear what we are to be about. We are to be loving, just, merciful, and prophetic. We are to show no partiality. We are to heal and be advocates for the poor and marginalized, the scandalized, and the despised. We are to be relentless in calling people to account, including and primarily ourselves, and to encourage each other to live up to the fullness of our goodness in God. And we are to do this with great humility, clarity, and with God's help, who is the power in our lives. In this season of Epiphany, I invite you to reflect and consider the ways God has been made known to you personally and to us as a community of faith. As we hear these stories each week, I encourage you to invite the powerful presence of God into your lives once again, that you may be part of that great light that shines on the world's darkness.